Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another trick, the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We're on volume 24, chapter 5. And I'm happy to say, once again, I was right about everything. I had it all down pat. All my predictions came true. I was way off. It's great though, right? It's great though. I know it frustrates some people having actual predictions that don't come true. I think it makes it fun. If I predicted everything to be true, then I don't know, I probably pre-read it all. But it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it, and I hope you guys enjoy it as well. But yeah, things didn't really go the way that I thought, and I guess this sort of route makes sense. Chapter 5 is probably easily one of my most mixed chapters I've read in a long time, where I feel like I like certain parts of it, but there's certain other parts that I don't like, which I'll get more into when we get around it. But it's a mixed chapter, and there's definitely something in there that just absolutely gut punched me, so hopefully I don't get too emotional reading it. But it's also an extremely long chapter, so I'm probably figuring we'll only do one chapter this time around. Plus, it's a busy week, so hopefully you guys don't mind if it ends up being a shorter Mushoku Monday than usual. But as per usual, greatly appreciate you guys for dropping by. Greatly appreciate your support, all that kind of stuff. It means a great deal to me. Hope you guys are doing well. But yes, hope you guys had a great Christmas as well. And yes, as per usual, greatly appreciate everybody that supports the channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. Spud Monkey last week with 3 months at this point. Thank you so much for your support. Inferno Torch with the massive amount of supers like usual. Thank you so much, Inferno Torch. Nicholas dropping 21 gifted memberships. Thank you so much, Nicholas, for writing out those emotes to everybody. Nathaniel with a super. Totally Not an Ill with a massive super. Thank you. Gods McDiesel with a super. And Roy's Moist with 2 supers. Thank you so much, Roy's Moist. It means so much to me. You guys are so amazing. But with that said, let's dive into it. Chapter 5, The Abyssal King Vita. Again, this kind of went quick. There's a part of it that's almost anticlimactic. I'm thinking some grand scale thing with Vita, and it's it gets wrapped up in a chapter. Okay. Let's have the what if chapters. That's really what this is. I was talking to the mods about the fact that most writers, when they're doing their stories, at some point they'll finish the story and people are upset about how it ended, and so they decide to do a what if chapter on the side where they're well, what if they got with this person? This is what happens with the story, and they make a whole volume based on that. Refugion's I'll just make a chapter with everybody's in it. And the one that I actually was most interested in, it totally cuts it short. We'll get into it. Rudeus jumped up, panting, and looking around himself. He saw a campfire, an unfamiliar forest, illuminated by fire. His heart was pounding, arms heavy and numb, like he'd been clenching his fists, or the circulation had been cut while he was asleep. His mouth was so dry that his tongue stuck to the inside of his mouth. It felt disgusting. What's wrong? Rudeus turned his head to see a woman. She was on one knee beside him, looking concerned. She had smooth blonde hair and confident eyes. Not a bombshell, but slim and good-looking. Dude, not a bombshell? Sarah's a bombshell. Sarah, he jumped up all of a sudden. Bad dream? A bad dream? Yeah, maybe. It did feel like he had a weird dream, but he couldn't remember what it was about. He felt sure that it had been a nightmare, but it slipped from him. Dreams were like that. Keep it together, okay? We're going into a labyrinth tomorrow. No one's going to think it's funny if you flub up the real thing because you were sleep deprived. I know that. Not that I can imagine you screwing it up that bad enough to get a party member killed or anything. Sarah sat next to him, bumping shoulders. He put his arms around her, and she rested her head on his shoulder. She smelt nice. We'll be retiring too when this is over, huh? Yeah. Sarah and him weren't just party members. They were lovers and engaged. Everything before this was all a dream. Nobody believed that, right? I don't think anybody believed that this was it was all a dream, and he actually ended up with Sarah in the end. This labyrinth exploration was going to be their last. They planned to retire as adventurers and get married. How Rudeus ended up here? It wasn't that long of a story. It happened when he was around 13. A lot happened. He gave up on life, just managed to drag himself on. Spirit rock bottom, a shell of himself searching for Zenith. That's when he joined Counter Arrow. At first, he thought that he had enough of being in a party, and was cold to Sarah and the others, but they all treated him with kindness, especially Timothy, the leader, and the second in command, Suzanne. They ended up working together in the same town for a while. Sarah was the only one that was standoffish to him, until he saved her life. At that point, she fell for Rudeus. She was an assertive woman, very standoffish on the surface, but didn't really know how to hide her affection. She moved fast, so their relationship heated up fast as well. When he spent the night with Sarah, he didn't think he liked her that much. He noticed her though, but kept a distance. Probably because he was a virgin in his past life. Perhaps that was why they fell in love so naturally. The natural friction of her pushing and pulling away. They crossed that line early. But after that, as he got to know her better, his feelings for her developed unrushed. That's why it lasted so long. The two of them carried on adventuring in the grip of new love. Eloise was the reason why things changed. She gave Rudeus news that Zenith was alive, and that Paul, Talhand, and Geese were working to rescue her. He immediately decided to go support Paul. Sarah and Rudeus left Counter Arrow and went to the Beggar Continent. The rescue mission was an unmitigated success, and then they went home. Then Zenith told Rudeus that she wanted him to live for himself, so Rudeus and Sarah went on adventuring. They had now cleared 5 challenging labyrinths as an S-rank adventure party. The whole world knew about them. This is so weird. It's, again, I do technically like what-if scenarios. This is the part of this chapter that I like. I'm gonna lay out things that I liked and didn't like. And I think, like I said before, it's gonna paint that picture that I'm feeling about this chapter where it's such a mixed bag. Like, there's parts of it that I hate and parts of it that I love. I like what-if chapters. This is presenting the idea that, yes, when he left from, the Fatoa region, went up north, everything played out the same. But the only difference is that because he doesn't remember Edis, in his mind right here, he's able to paint this picture that, oh, things worked out with Sarah. He just immediately got with her. They got together. They, made love and all that kind of stuff. He fell in love with her because he didn't have this blockade. And this is what's interesting about this what if, because it's not, like I said before, where it's typical authors where they'll do like, oh, now with this one, he ends up with this girl. So everybody that liked this girl, here's what happened. It's more of an idea of sort of playing a what-if scenario in Rudeus's head where it didn't happen, but it is playing into a desire. It is where Vita, obviously, spoilers, Vita is playing into his desires and making those things come true. And so this does sort of play into his head of almost Vita giving into that desire for him to see a future where he was with Sarah. But it's always interesting that with every single one of these what-if scenarios, he never has his wives in the picture. Right here, he doesn't even think about Edis. And even like later on, it's pointed out to him, you're forgetting why you were pushed up here. What broke you? He doesn't remember Edis. So right here, he just, okay, well, if he doesn't remember Edis, he doesn't remember that he had ED. He gets with Sarah, everything's fine and peachy, and now suddenly he's super happy he's with Sarah, and it does play a scenario that, yes, this could have worked out. He could have fell in love with her eventually, and the two of them formed a really strong bond. It makes sense. It's all making sense in his head. This doesn't feel off. It all makes sense. Where it all falls apart is, yes, Ellen Lee shows up and says, hey, Paul's over here, and it plays it out as if everything went well. He didn't get the Teleportation Labyrinth book, so he didn't have that as a guide, but yet they still figured it out. They still managed to conquer the labyrinth, and yes, they all came out happy. And even Zenith herself wasn't affected. That's the interesting part. Why wasn't Zenith, broken? It almost plays it out like in his mind, if we went there quickly, Zenith would have been fine. But of course, it's also playing into the idea that Vita wouldn't want to portray the idea that Zenith came out of it still broken, because that would be a sadness that would not make him comfortable with staying in this dream state. Again, it's interesting to get the what-ifs here. Hey, Rudeus. She chuckled. Nothing. He loved her smile and impulsively reached for her butt. She went along with his mischief without resistance. In the past, she would glare at him, but now it was just standard affection. They gazed into each other's eyes, hand on each other's bodies. Something suddenly flitted across her face. She looked uneasy. Once we quit being adventurers, do you think we'll make it? You're bringing that up now? Cold feet? We're getting married and settling down. That means becoming a mother too, right? Cooking, cleaning, and washing, and raising a child. I don't know if I can do it. That's fine. I'll do it then. You can keep on doing what you're good at. You think so? I know so. Sarah was still nervous about starting a family. She'd always been an adventurer, didn't know any other way of life. Her worries about how she'd handle suddenly becoming a wife and a mother came up over and over again. It wasn't that Rudeus didn't understand how she felt, but he had memories of his previous life. When he had died, Japan's cultural expectations had started to shift towards expecting men and women to both share the roles of childcare. Rudeus didn't feel the need to get hung up on Sarah doing all the housework. They could even set it up that she'd work while Rudeus was a house husband. Even when he told her that, she didn't seem convinced. I mean, everybody in the situation, when they become parents, they're always uneasy about, can I even do it? I mean, it makes sense. You've never done that before. It's, of course, doing something new. That's something you've never done before. How can it not be something that would cause nerves? Yes, somebody that's probably done a lot of childcare, like babysitting or something like that, would be a lot more comfortable with it because they know what to expect. But everybody's going to have that uneasiness. But yes, based on what we've seen of her with her new party members, it does seem like she has evolved to the point where she has become almost like the big sister type. And that's plenty right there. At least shows that she knows how to nurture people and take care of people. But yeah, this is a whole different other realm. I could see her doing well. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you don't know until you try. There's no point in worrying about the future. We just got to give it our all in each moment. You say that, but all you're interested in is the night after the wedding. Hey, that's not true. Liar. My eyes are up here, by the way. Sarah giggled. She was teasing, but her tone was soft. If he was being honest, he did have the expectations for married life. All alone in the house, nothing was off the table. They'd work hard on making a son. A grandchild for Paul. Here it goes. Here it goes. There's so much Paul in here. It sucks. This is the part that I hate but like at the same time. Sarah leaned in and whispered in his ear, "But I want 3 kids." She went bright red before looking away. She may have embarrassed herself a little. For her, it was a bold invitation. Anyways, I'm going to bed. You take watch. Roger that. Good night. Good night. She punched him lightly on the shoulder and went back to her sleeping bag. Conscious that he was smiling, Rudeus threw another log in the fire. Then, with a start, Rudeus realized that another party member was watching from where they lay. I like this. Again, like I said before, the reason why I've always liked the idea of Sarah becoming one of the wives is because every single interaction that we have between the two of them is very teasing. They're very fun with each other, whereas I feel like a lot of the other characters don't really have that chemistry with him. Rudeus, I almost want Rudeus to have a teasing character. It's like all the teasing characters aren't part of the harem. Aisha likes to tease, not part of the harem. Ariel likes to tease, not part of the harem yet. Sarah likes to tease, not part of the harem. That's always been the struggle for me, so I always kind of like the idea of her. But I do kind of wonder if a lot of that teasing would go away, but still have a little bit in here. So I think that Refugin kind of portrayed the relationship a little well here, and the idea they become more affectionate, but there's still that old tease that she likes to do. Then, with a start, Rudeus realized another party member was watching from where they lay. I hate this so much. I hate this so freaking much. Hey, he sat up slowly, his long hair tied at his neck. He gave a languorous wave. It was Paul. What's Paul doing here? He should be dead. No, he wasn't dead. Rudeus couldn't kill him off that easy. After rescuing Zenith from the labyrinth, he moved to the Orsted Kingdom with her. There they were working to rebuild Fatoa. They cheerfully sent off Rudeus when he decided to become an adventurer. However, when the labyrinth exploration mission came up, Paul butted in. You kids alone? I'd be worried sick. Yeah, that's definitely how it went. He's got to make it make sense in his head. Like, yeah, of course he would totally come along with us. Again, I hate this. I really hate this segment. Dad, it's gross snooping on people. Snoop? What's that sleepy brain of yours talking about? Oh, come on. Anyways, the two of you have a nice thing going on. You're going to marry her? That's the plan. Dad, you were there when I introduced her, weren't you? Nope, I wasn't. That was weird. He had definitely been there. Maybe Rudeus was half asleep. More importantly, aren't you forgetting something? What's something? Why did you give up on yourself before you met Sarah? Why? Well, what was it again? That's right. Rizurd seen him to Fatoa. Then when he woke up, there'd been nobody there but Rizurd. Can't even remember a simple thing like that. And you say you're getting married. Paul's teasing was starting to tick him off, so Rudeus stood to walk to him. What's your problem? Did you tag along just to say that? Hey, I'm not saying it because I enjoy this. Then what? Rudeus went to go grab Paul, but then saw it. This is so bad. Screw all this, dude. Isn't it obvious? Paul's lower half was missing. Interesting. That's the one thing that it seems like it's subconsciously he knows that it will wake him up. I mean, we'll get into that stuff later on, but didn't want to see that again. Didn't want to see that again. Rudeus leapt up. Eyes flew wide open. They were met with the sight of an unfamiliar room. He noticed a soft blanket covering his legs, a door to the bedroom, and a half-open window that let in a breeze. Behind him was Treant's seat pillow and a crafted figurine on the bedside table. This was a familiar bed. It was his house in the magic sea of Shariah. He was panting. He had the feeling that he had a strange dream. What was it? He couldn't remember what he dreamed about, only that he had a nightmare, or otherwise he wouldn't have leapt up like that. Dreams were like that. He got out of the bed and stretched. It was a beautiful day again. Soon, summer would end and give way to fall. He couldn't wait. As he bounded down the stairs, 2 children charged up past him. They had dark brown hair and beast ears. I immediately knew what it was. This is where it all kind of clicks. Okay, I know what we're doing now. This is where it's a definite, okay, we're going to do everybody. We're going to do every single character, every single what-if scenario. Next is Linia. Well, it's either Linia or Priscilla right here. Watch out or you fall. Okay. They ran into their room, and Rudeus continued down to the first floor. He went to the dining room, and there was a woman preparing breakfast. Her voluptuous curves were packed into her plain clothes, but they couldn't contain her. Her butt peeked out from the bottom of her skirt, along with her tail. As he walked in, her pointed ears twitched, and she turned around. Morning, Linia. Good morning. She sounded a little curt. Rudeus felt a pang of vague unease you get after an unpleasant dream. He put his arms around her. Oh, Linia. Yeah? Linia was his wife. But how did they end up married again? Rudeus recalled it was when they were students. He was worried about his ED and tried everything to treat his little guy. That's when he met Linia and Priscilla. They were young and fresh and full of wild energy. They tussled, and then Rudeus tied them up and peeled off their clothes. Still, even then, his ED persisted. A year went by, and another. Every encounter in class and in the cafeteria, they noticed each other a little more. Eventually, the two of them became overly alluring. His little guy began to slowly but surely respond. In the fall of the 7th year at the university, he had fully recovered. The two of them were in heat and came charging into his room. That took him back. What a night. On graduation, Linia and Priscilla fought, and Priscilla won. Priscilla returned to the Great Forest, and Linia came to live with Rudeus. Since then, they'd made babies every autumn. Linia hissed and grabbed at his hand after he grabbed her boob. Ow! Only when I'm in heat. That's the rule. Don't you forget it. Come on, it's just a hug. It won't stop with just a hug. Not with you. A wife isn't her husband's sex slave, yeah. I'm not trying to make you one. Rudeus sighed and sat down at the table. Linia was always like this. According to some beast folk rule, he was only allowed to do her while she was in heat. When that happened, she came straight for him. When Linia was in heat, her baby-making urges was more than enough to satisfy his sex drive. And those babies, super cute. That wasn't the problem. A little more touching didn't seem like it would hurt, just to show that they loved each other. Yeah, that's the... There's the bad side of this whole thing. Okay, so this scenario right here. I can see this. Again, that was sort of what I was getting into with my whole thought process around the ED. Is that I feel like Refugian sort of placed the whole aphrodisiac aspect into it, which we'll get into again with Ariel's. It kind of placed the whole Luke juice thing into play just as something to push him to go. And then the actual mental scars went away with the idea that Sylphie was there the next morning. So I do kind of see this kind of happening where as long as he had some time to kind of experience with the two of them, yeah, I can totally see Linia eventually, hopefully, kind of curing of that. And yes, it sort of plays it out like Priscilla and her were both like a duo with him, which is I'm all for, honestly, a really good in there. But eventually getting to that point where, yes, one of them had to still return back to the Great Forest. It still has that logic of the story overall still in play, that one of them in the end still had to go back to the Great Forest. It does kind of make me wonder if Linia purposely lost just to stay with Rudeus. But yeah, I can't say that I'm against it, but at the same time, it does seem kind of rough, the idea that he can't really mess with her like ever, like not even touching except for once a year. I mean, it sort of plays it out like that one time a year is something special, but that's rough. Having Linia around you all the time, especially like, again, like he mentions the idea of like the skirt with the tail kind of creeping up the butt shot. That would be tough to be around all the time and not be able to touch. Breakfast ready, yeah. Linia beat an empty pot before the kids came rushing down. Not just 2 either. There were 12 of them. He's got a pack, dude. He's making a pack. Beast folk had 2 to 3 children every pregnancy, so they were packed. Almost every room in the house had a kid in it now. Eat up and get to work, yeah. Your pupils are waiting, yeah. Okay. He started eating breakfast. She was a great cook. That right there should have broke all the logic. I think, I don't know, if she applied herself, I think eventually she could get there, but right here is like, I could totally see myself going, wait, no, something's off about this. Something's not right. Linia's a good cook. When they first got married, all she could do was grill meat, simmer fish, and boil vegetables. But over the last few years, she learned all sorts of dishes. The flavor was a little bland, but she was a different race, different taste buds. It couldn't be helped. Thank you. You're welcome. Riz finished his meal, got changed in his robes, and headed to work. He joined the Magician's Guild after graduation and was now a teacher at the university. He taught classes on non-vocalized magic. It was an extremely practical style, so the courses were very popular. If he established his teaching methods and students did well, he might be looking at vice principal or principal down the line. Yeah, the only problem with this is, I mean, it might be different for different races, but the only problem with this is that they have to bring kids in that are like really young. I think the youngest they've ever had students shown, I think was like 5 or something like that. They would have to bring in some very young students to be able to actually have that happen. I mean, that was something he technically did already present to the university. I'm not saying that they won't. He's already technically given it to them. I'm off. Have a nice day at work, yeah. Heading off to the front door, he was ready for another hard day of work for his wife and kids. Huh? The door to the living room was ajar, and he felt someone was inside. Someone Rudeus knew so well, it hurt. Opened the door, as though someone called him. He saw a man. He was sitting on the sofa, facing away. One arm drooped over the back of the sofa. Huh? He turned around. Hey, it was Paul. But Rudeus wondered what he was doing here. Wasn't he dead? Then he remembered. He wasn't. He'd given up on the teleportation labyrinth and came back home. They then all went back to the magic city of Soraya, where Paul lived nearby. Yeah, that's how it went. Lilia and Norm were living at Paul's house too. Paul had blamed him for not going to save him, but they got along well. That's definitely how the story went. Again, another kind of trying to play it out like, oh, okay, this is how it went. But it's interesting that in this one, he's playing it out as if Paul gave up. Paul just like, can't do the labyrinth. I guess we'll give up and come back. And he doesn't like Rudeus because he never came to help him out, which is kind of a funny thought process there, because that was one of the scenarios that the man guy was playing to Rudeus. No, he would have worked out. He would have figured out eventually, and they would have come home and everybody been happy. But no, you decided to go, and that's what got Paul killed. But here it's like playing it out like Paul would have given up at some point. Again, technically with the man god, he probably was lying, but it is interesting. He also doesn't bring up Aisha specifically, which is kind of interesting. Like, he's just living with Lilia and Norn. Does that imply that Aisha is living with him and he just haven't brought it up? You have a lovely wife. A lovely wife? It's not like this is the first time you've seen her. Nope, first time. It is technically the first time he would have seen her. Paul smiled broadly and shook his head. Are you happy like this? What? What are you trying to say? Nothing particular. Just asking if you feel like anything's missing. Nothing's missing. Linia was a good wife. Sure, she only let him touch him on a set period every year, but it wasn't like anything bad enough to complain about. At those times, she gave him more loving than his body could keep up with. She'd be pregnant with more kids, so his manly instincts were more than satisfied. His job was going well too. Popular teacher, classes got raving reviews. Students loved him. He was a respected colleague. Super successful, bright future. Yeah, nothing missing, huh? Well, that's a relief. It is. But aren't you forgetting something? Paul's voice was gentle, like he was chiding a stupid child, but it sounded like an accusation. What about that job of yours, for example? Who'd you imitate to get all those students and teacher to like you? Well, that's... Who was it again? Best girl? Reese thought that he'd seen something blue shoot in front of him and shook his head, but the discord in his mind only intensified. Someone taught you, right? About how to succeed in the world. What's your problem? Just say what you gotta say. Reese let his anger take hold of him. Heading to the sofa, he went around to face Paul, seizing him by the front of his shirt. Then he froze. All right, I'll say it. I'm already dead. Paul's lower half was missing. Now, this is interesting because he won't actually tell him. Like with every single one of these situations, he won't tell him the actual name of the person that he's forgetting. With the earlier one, he's trying to push him to remember Edis. With this one, he's trying to push him to remember Roxy. But every single time, the break point is, yes, he's dead. Now, this is, of course, where it gets into what I immediately at this point am like, oh, we're doing this thing. This thing where we keep repeating the same thing over and over again. Okay, he wakes up, he's panicked, he had a nightmare. Where is he at? Oh, here's a new wife. Now he's in this kingdom. Why am I here? Well, let me tell you the story about why I'm here. Oh, Paul's here too. Hey, Paul. Hey, you're forgetting something? What am I forgetting? You're angering me. Oh, I'm dead already. Bam. Wake up. Who's the next wife that he's going to be with? This is the thing that I don't like. I don't like repetitive storytelling. It's sort of it's like the fairy tale concept. The fairy tale concept of where you have to repeat something over and over again to drive it into the mind of the reader to make a point. And it frustrates the hell out of me. So yeah, by this point, I'm going, oh, we're not doing this right. I think it was after Ariel's where I'm like, okay, this is getting repetitive. Please move on. But it's fine because there's a lot of stuff in here that I still enjoy. I don't like seeing Paul again right now in the fact that he's dead. Rhea slept out of his bed, panting, throat dry, back soaked with sweat. A horrible dream. Unbelievable dream. That was one hell of a nightmare. Is something wrong? I just had a strange dream. Back when we were at the university. Linia. That Beast Folk woman was there, right? In my dream, we were married and even had kids. I was teaching kids non-vocalized magic. That's a nightmare. You got a cat girl? That's a nightmare? Was it a nightmare? Reese was wondering now that she'd mentioned it. Linia and him spent a short period of time with each other, engaging in passionate baby making, and then the rest of the time she took care of the children while he taught magic. It was a modest life, but a good one. Yeah, it is. He was watching his wife climb down from their canopy bed with sleepy eyes. She was a goddess of beauty. Perfect height. Perfect sized breast. Her butt was a bit small, but it went perfect with her height and her breast. She was slim overall, neither scrawny nor flabby. The effect wasn't average. It was extraordinary. Her body was a definition of well-proportioned. Only thing out of place was her bedhead, her beautiful blonde hair a bit of a mess. It didn't diminish her charm. Her unruly hair gave her the allure of a grown woman. In a word, she was sexy. Knowing it was messy due to their night together made it 30% sexier. I've married a wonderful woman, and I'm in a position where I can have everything I ever wanted. I couldn't bear being a teacher in a town in the middle of nowhere. Are you flattering me by any chance? Good job. She was his wife, Ariel Anamoy Asura. Perhaps you yearn for that kind of life. There's been a lot of urgent government business lately, hasn't there? The life of the royal family certainly isn't easy. In our job, even the smallest things bring to them great responsibility. But there's no guarantee our happiness will be enough to make that responsibility worth it. One person can only experience so much happiness. You think so? I imagine that in your country town, working as a teacher, surrounded by your children, the balance between happiness and responsibility was very different from your life as royalty. Perhaps instead of a woman like me, a girl like Linia is more of your taste. That was ridiculous. Ariel was the ultimate woman. Flawless. She subtly corrected Rudeus' faults, even deferred to him in public. She didn't mention what he did to other women, and let him keep concubines. On top of that, she was good at her job. Everyone relied on her. She was the ideal leader, an idol of the people. Except maybe she had some faults. She was argumentative and valued logic too highly over emotion. Her kinks were a little unique too. While he wouldn't get into what they were, what they did the night before, he couldn't call the fault. She get into some freaking stuff. That could be a fault for some people. What they did last night, yeah, he liked it. He's like, I'm all for it. Ariel is probably the most interesting thing because, again, I love their chemistry, but I'm not like 100% sold on them being together. In the end, like if you ask me of like I obviously love Ariel. I think she's a fantastic character. I love, again, the chemistry between the two of them. I will admit that I don't think that they're good for each other. And it is interesting right here, Rudeus is sort of playing in his head, again, through this whole dream. And again, possibilities here that is sort of playing into what he would feel it would turn out. That yes, they do kind of have issues, but there's good things about it. I've always had a feeling that I wanted somebody to be able to tell Rudeus no. And I feel like there's too little of him being told no. And what it seems like Rudeus in his own mind feels is that Ariel would be somebody that would tell him no. And that he would sort of find fault in the idea that she is argumentative and values logic too much. That she's not an emotional person. But that does technically get into what he feels in their relationship is a problem, is that he never knows if she truly does like him. And I do really feel like that would be a massive question mark. Because she's so good at playing people, because she's so good at manipulating people, it does make you constantly wonder, do you really like me? I think even Sylvie sort of addressed that at times, getting into that idea of Ariel and how she manipulates people and almost feeling like there's no love there and there might be a manipulation instead of actually caring. I always felt like that was a good portion of why Sylvie never wanted Ariel to get close to Rudeus, is that idea that he would basically fall like putty into her hands. Plus, I think a large part of that is the fact that Ariel is her friend and doesn't want that to cause that friction in their relationship. I'm sorry, did I let my mouth run away with me a little? No, I was just thinking, you might actually be right. Please, tell me if you need time off. The kingdom is more stable these days, so I can spare you for a short break. You could take a trip. It might be nice to take one of your concubines. If I got some time off, I'd like to spend all my day with you in my arms. Oh, you. Always joking. I'm serious. How long has it been since they first slept together? At first, he'd taken a lot of concubines and embraced debauchery. But these days, that was growing dull. She was the only one he needed. The happiness in his life was being able to do whatever he wanted to her in bed. All right, let's set aside a day for that soon. As her lady-in-waiting dressed her, Rudeus stood and spread his arms. A second lady-in-waiting rushed to him. Watching the two dress them made Rudeus feel important. He felt a pang of nostalgia for the time at the University of Magic. After he entered, he met Ariel. Despite coming out worse in a political struggle and being driven from her kingdom, she was dauntless and gathered allies. She scouted Rudeus, the only one at university who could do non-vocalized magic. Even then, she was gorgeous and charismatic. He was cold to her, partly because he suffered from ED. It was when she cured him when things changed. Her method was a bit rough. She used an aphrodisiac to force him to get aroused and come on to her. At the time, he didn't realize that it all had been her design. Thinking he'd done something horrifying, he became her ally out of guilt and wished for atonement. I, I, I sullied her. I have to serve her. I don't deserve her. I did something wrong. He was like an especially strong bodyguard. He wasn't given any particular privileges, just there to protect Ariel. What began to change, of course, was the time that he spent near her. Ariel always did her best to play the part of royalty. Sometimes, though, she let him see the vulnerable young woman she was. Little by little, he fell for her. He wouldn't deny he had impure thoughts from the start, but it wasn't purely for her body. He fell for her soul, too. His fellow bodyguard and him butted heads repeatedly. He probably had his own feelings for Ariel. Luke died in the war in Osra Kingdom. Rip Luke. Well, Ariel and Rudeus survived. Rudeus confessed his feelings to Ariel and got everything he wanted. The best woman in the world, greatest country in the world. Damn right. He became king of the kingdom of Osra. Rudeus Anamoy Osra. I so badly want to put that in the title, but that's spoiler. It wouldn't be technically spoiler, but it's kind of spoiler. People would think it's spoiler. That's the problem. People would think it's spoiler. That was who he was. He was actually just an extension of Ariel, her puppet. She said she only did it that way because things would run more smoothly than if she took the lead as queen. Rudeus was already from a highly ranked bloodline in Osra, so no one objected. Out in the world, they called him Magician King Rudeus. Maybe he could find a power-up out somewhere and gain more pre-modifiers. Become Super Mega Magician King Rudeus. Similar to the previous one, again, this would be the Sylphie one. Like with the previous one, there's always something missing that sort of plays into it. I guess this would be the Sylphie one. I was kind of half expecting when Paul to show up to kind of say something effective, are you not taking the place of somebody else? You do not remember who was there at Ariel's side? It would be Sylphie. But oddly enough, they didn't actually do that. But this would obviously be the one where if, I guess, Sylphie wasn't present at Ariel's side, because now he's able to sort of fit in there without it coming to question mark, okay, Sylphie is right here. Do you not remember who Sylphie is? And instead, he gets that position where technically Sylphie would be. Now, granted, you can make the argument that Ariel would have never made it that far without Sylphie at her side, but there was technically timelines before where Sylphie was not at Ariel's side and she survived that long. So it doesn't necessarily need to have Sylphie at her side for her to survive. But yeah, this is like one of the very few like what if scenarios that I actually played in my head of what are the possibility of Rudeus taking position as king. I was more putting it as the possibility that, Ariel would become queen of the Osra Kingdom, but that Rudeus would be sort of in name only, or possibly wedded to Ariel, just not having to stay in the kingdom because she was the queen. But interesting that he notes the fact that she let him see the vulnerable young woman she was. I mean, that could be strictly in the idea of in bed. He gets to see that, you get to see her behind closed doors where she's no longer a refined, beautiful woman walking around that has to be, show strength all the time. Now suddenly in bed, she's different. Like she's a bottom in bed or something like that. But yeah, I don't think, if I remember correctly, we don't really get to see much of Ariel in a vulnerable state that he's talking about here. Now, yes, we do get to see moments where he's talking to her, or like when they go to the graves and whatnot, you get to see that other side of her where it's showing a little bit more to her than just being the strong self. But it's interesting to kind of see her finally showing some sort of vulnerability, unfortunately, in a what-if scenario. But yeah, I can totally see him just being a puppet person. I guess it kind of putting it in the idea that he's always up front. He's the face of the kingdom itself while she works on things in the background. And yes, that technically does put her in a position that she would be less targeted. But I think most people would probably still be targeting Ariel in the end. If anybody wanted to take over them, they know that Ariel would be the one to go to. Rudeus would be a shield. He's a threat. He's the strong one, where she's more the easier way to cripple the current rulership. He wasn't truly sure if Ariel loved him or not. Couldn't shake the feeling that she was just using him for his power and position. She'd only married him to facilitate a smooth governance of the nation after all. His unease about that was part of why he'd taken a huge number of concubines. Recently, he began to think that it didn't matter what Ariel's true feelings were. She was a hard worker. She was making an effort. It was possible that it was fake love, but it was enough to satisfy him. That's the sad part of it. Even in this scenario, he would doubt if she even loved him. Like, did she ever love him? Is it just for power? Because that's technically, and again, I think that a lot of this stuff is playing off of in Rudeus's desires. In here, Vita is creating a what-if scenario based on his own feelings of the situation. What if it did happen? It would probably be like this. if it happened based on his memories and his thoughts of the situation, it would probably play out like this. He would probably feel like he would never be loved by her, that it all is just a fake thing. Because in Rudeus's mind, who is Ariel? Ariel is somebody who will do anything for strength and power and to fulfill what she's supposed to fulfill. Everything is a stepping stone to get this thing to fulfill what I was supposed to do and what I sought out to do and what so many people died for me to do. And he could totally see that being a situation that if we were to get married, it was probably for power. But it's not for me. I'm still happy. Maybe he was being deceived, but what an enjoyable position to be led into. On the other hand, if he became more of a hindrance than an assistant, she'd likely turn on him. Whether that came to pass depended on how much effort he put in. He had to work hard. All right, shall we go? There's another mountain of governance business to get through today. Yeah, they left the bedroom. Everyone was bowing as they passed them. This was power. If he told one of them he didn't like how they bowed, they'd probably drop to their knees, white as a sheet. They'd probably lick his boots if he told them to. He wouldn't do anything like that. but it felt great that he was in a position that he could do it. First stop of the day was an issue that came up overnight. No one had rushed to wake them, so it probably wasn't urgent. They'd clear it up, have meetings, probably go through some petitions. It would be nice if they could make holiday plans too. Rudeus wanted to have a baby with Ariel soon, and enjoyed his role as a stud horse. Your Majesty! Just then, a knight captain came running up before kneeling. The knight who went out to slay monsters in the East Forest returned on the verge of death. Before he dies, he wished to speak to you directly, Your Majesty. What? We didn't receive that report. The knight is dying for the sake of Your Majesty. I beg you, be with him for his final hours. You don't need to go, dear. No, I'll go see him. The final wish for a knight that fought for his country. He could at least hear him out. Rudeus could remember his name. With that thought, Rudeus hurried into the audience chamber. Ariel looked annoyed, but she smoothed it out quickly and followed after. The subjects were assembled in the audience chamber. Duke Notos, Duke Boreas, Duke Eros, Duke Separu and others, all around stars of the Ashran nobility. They all stood around a man that lay on a stretcher, covered with a blanket. Rudeus knew his face. It was Paul. What was he doing here? Right. When he learned that he'd become a king, he immediately pledged himself to his service. This guy not getting along with the Notos family. It's a weird one. This is a weird one, I'm sorry. I followed all the other ones, but this one's one I do not follow. He bent a knee to him. As a knight, he strived to protect him. Hey, Rudeus. He raised his hand casually, as if he wasn't injured at all. Dad, I heard from the captain that you drove out the monsters. Monsters? What are you talking about? Huh? Paul gave a patient sigh. That's not why I'm here. I'm asking you to tell me. Rudeus gasped as Paul pushed the blanket off himself. His legs were gone. He spoke calmly despite the gory fatal wound. Let's pick off where we left off. Again, this is where it's like, okay, I got it. I get the joke. The Ariel one was a little bit long. I have to admit, the Ariel one was a bit long. I like the what if scenario with Ariel, but it feels too long. And here's the one that ticked me off. This is the one that ticked me off. I'm like, I just got done with Ariel's one, and I'm like, these are getting longer, and I'm getting the gist here. Can we let's move on? I don't like the repetitive natures of this. And then I get an Aisha one. I'm like, okay, here we go. Aisha one, let's go. All right, let's go. Aisha one, let's go. And it's cut short. The hell? Refugin, you give me an Aisha one and you cut it short? Bullcrap. Rudeus opened his eyes with a shout. He had a bad dream, a nightmare. He'd felt like he had nothing but nightmares in the past few days. Love, what's wrong? A woman beside him wiped the sweat from his forehead with her hand. She had ample curves and precocious smile. His wife, Aisha. Let's go! Wincest. We have Wincest, people. We have Wincest. Which is proof that he's thought about it. It's proof that he's thought about it. I like how he's got it. He spends a lot of time excusing himself later, which is so funny. Like, just so you guys know, I don't do it. It was his wife, Aisha. How did they get married? Oh, right. She was always flirting. And every year, her body got more... Wait. Hey, what's wrong? Oh, now we're married? Should I keep calling you Big Brother? Too late to stop now, I guess. You're such a pervert, Big Brother. Rudeus didn't reply. Paul was there, behind Aisha, sitting in a chair. Damn it, Paul! Damn it, Paul! Paul, no! Damn it, Paul! Why do you have to interrupt this one? Why do you have to interrupt this one? He didn't have any legs. He just watching and shot a flipping grin. He's all good. Paul's over to like, really, Rudeus? Really? I mean, it's all right, but really, Rudeus? This is what you're doing? Just so creepy. I don't think they're gonna adapt. I mean, they could. They have to adapt this. Like, this would be probably the funniest moment in the anime ever if they adapt this right. It goes over to the Ariel. Man, everything's great, really great. And they don't even have to get into super detail with the inner thoughts of like, what he thinks about the relationship, whatever. Just play it out. It just cuts over. Rudeus wakes up. He's with Ariel. They get up. They start getting dressed. He goes in. He starts doing his work. And he's thinking to himself, this is a really great life. I mean, I got everything I want. I kind of wonder if she loves me. Paul shows up. Snap. Wakes up in the next position. And right here, it could literally just be he wakes up, he looks over her, and she's like, oh, hey, should I call you big brother anymore? And then just the field of view is literally from Aisha on her side in his bed. And then suddenly it kind of slowly, the vision kind of pans up. And there's Paul with a grin on his face. It would be so good. It would be so freaking good. Oh, anyways. I'm having too much fun with the Aisha part. It's no good. I've already got you. You've worked it out, right? Work what out? Oh yeah, Rudeus started to work it out. The reason behind the string of nightmares, the sense that something was wrong. He woke up over and over, and every time it had been a dream. This was also a dream. He finally realized it. It's all Abyssal King Vita. This farce is over. Abyssal King, right. Abyssal King Vita. Now, Rudeus remembered. Now you remember. Now you remember when you have this would have been a fun scenario to play out Aisha. I think it would be a fun scenario. But no, we had to walk around for forever as a king of Asra. Suddenly, Rudeus was back in his room. His study in a large house in Shariah. His desk covered in diaries and magical treatises. On the shelf was a stone tablet, engraved with a magic circle and a half-finished figurine. He was standing in the middle of the room, while Paul sat in a study chair. He couldn't tell, since he was sitting down, but he probably didn't have any legs. Paul was dead after all. The Manatite Hydra had carried off his legs in the bowels of the labyrinth, and he died because of Rudeus' mistake. Are you the Abyssal King Vita? Paul rolled his eyes. Of course not. If I was Abyssal King Vita, you think I would woken you up all those times? Oh, yeah. Abyssal King Vita is backed into a corner. Okay, sure, but what are you? Hey now, did you forget your old man's face? Well, I mean, it has been a long time since you died. Shit, that's cold. You better not have forgotten. Paul grinned. The smile was exactly like Paul. He remembered. Just looking at him, a lump rose in his throat. Crap, he was going to cry. Paul's expression immediately turned to serious as he stared at the door behind him. Oof. Sucks. I've chased Abyssal King Vita here. There's something that feels wrong in this house. Find it. Destroy it. That's Vita's core. Got it. I hate it. I hate what the core is. I really hate what the core is. Oof. Rudeus didn't know who this Paul was, but he wasn't an enemy. At least he thought so, despite not having any basis or evidence. This might even be Vita's scheme, but Paul will come up from his happy dreams. Resolved, Rudeus exited the study. He was in the house that he bought when he married Sylphie. The mansion where he found the strange doll was Zenova and Cliff. He then brought his sisters to live with him, married Roxy, then married Edis, his dream home where he lived with his 3 wives. He knew it was real. His thoughts were still muddled, but he could hold on to those facts. He walked down the corridor and into the living room, where Lilia was cleaning. Master Rudeus, is something the matter? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm always leaving you to do all the cleaning and things. Staring surprised for a moment, she then smiled mischievously. Since you mention it, Master Rudeus, you can at least tidy your study yourself. I don't know if it's right for me to touch so many things in your room. Huh. I'll take care of it. Nothing felt off here. Lilia sounded like herself. She wasn't serious about struggling or wanting him to clean. Teasing was her way of showing affection. Even if Lilia didn't know what she was allowed to touch, Aisha did. Something must have changed over time, because when that part came up, I'm like, no, that doesn't sound like Lilia. Me personally, when I got this part, I'm like, I mean, she's changed a little, but it's mostly been in, she shows more of her vulnerability. She's been a lot more open to expressing pain and sorrow. But I've never seen her really be snappy like that. So I'm like, when that happened, I'm like, no, she must have changed more since we've last seen her, and they're just not covering it in the story. By the way, where's everybody? Miss Dorn is at school. And Aisha's advising at the mercenary band. Nothing felt wrong there. She didn't mention his 3 wives, because in this world, they didn't exist. For some reason, Rudeus felt certain that it was that sort of world, so nothing felt wrong. It was a contradiction, perhaps, but didn't feel wrong. It wasn't Lilia that he was looking for. Okay, thank you. Rudeus left the room and went to the front door, but nothing felt wrong there either. Yeah, right here, I guess the best way that I can put this as explaining why Edis, Sylphie, and Roxy aren't there. I'm assuming the reason why Vita is specifically avoiding creating those 3 is because the closest people to somebody, especially like wives, are probably the easiest ones that you can figure out are fake. That if they had a Roxy in front of Rudeus in this dream world, they probably wouldn't be able to mimic them completely. That if they put a Sylphie in front of him, he would find something's off about her. Something would be off. If they put Edis in front of him, something would be off. He'd be able to find something in her that's wrong, that they didn't fully mimic. Now again, a lot of this is being produced from his mind and his memories, so it could possibly pull off a perfect copy, but that probably could be why Vita doesn't want to create that here. I think for a lot of these scenarios, it doesn't at least produce Sylphie, because then he would have to explain in his mind why Sylphie would have accepted them. Because there is an aspect of, again, with the relationship that they've built together, that he has to take them to Sylphie first, and they're brought into the marriage. So if you bring Sylphie into the picture, he would have to explain how that would work. With Ariel, it wouldn't work. Sylphie never liked the idea of him getting with Ariel. Technically with Sarah, she technically did nudge him. Are you going to let Sarah go? I thought you were wanting to get married with her. I thought you were going to bring her into the family. Aisha, I don't know. I don't know if she's ever mentioned Aisha or not. One of those 2 reasons is the only thing I can think of is why it's not bringing them into the picture. Because it doesn't make sense why Vita wouldn't just create a world where they're there. Unless it's more of a fact of creating something that he's never experienced before, which could be. Creating a what-if scenario that he hasn't experienced before that wouldn't be too familiar, that he wouldn't question it. If Vita were just to create a replica of his life with his 3 wives in his house and everybody's there and they're happy, eventually he might start to question, wait, I'm supposed to be doing something right now, right? There's somebody coming after my wives. Maybe Vita created the scenario so that he didn't worry about the safety of his 3 wives, which currently are at threat by the man god, which immediately would bring him to, okay, where's Orsted? Where's the man god? What's our current plan? Rudeus left and went to the front door, but nothing felt wrong there either. Only Roxy's coat and Edis's training sword were missing, but Roxy and Edis didn't exist. That was normal. It's not normal. Knowing what feels wrong is tricky. It was ultimately subjective. You wouldn't just find a sense of wrongness lying around. He was looking carefully, but he wasn't good at these sort of spot the difference things. He never knew how to answer at first when Sylphie went to the hairdresser, then came home asking what was different that day. Admittedly, Sylphie didn't do stuff like that much. Anyways, it looked like he might have to start taking notes to work out his adversary's intention and what felt wrong here. Going to the dining room, Rudeus gasped. He found it. The thing that felt wrong. It's not fair. I said the same thing. It's not fair. I want it to be real. Thinking about it, all the dreams had been the manifestation of fantasies he had, wishful thoughts that had crossed his mind. The world where he never got ED and things were going well with Sarah. The world where Linia cured his ED and they got married. The world where the angelic beauty, Ariel, and he fell in love before he became king. The world where things happened between him and Aisha. The last one he never fantasized about explicitly, but he couldn't deny it. But he couldn't deny that it would have held a certain subconscious appeal. She was his little sister, so he didn't really get turned on by her. Really, for guys, stop. But that didn't mean that he didn't know that she was objectively attractive. In another situation, he might have been interested. The point was, they'd all been worlds made to suit him. Nothing had felt wrong. In each world, he hadn't even sensed anything was off until he faced an obvious contradiction. This house was different. Paul was here from the start, and he had his memories. That was how he knew that it was off from the moment that he saw her. "Oh, Rudy, you're home. You're early today," Zenith said as she got food ready. Placemats and dishes out for the whole family. Rudeus didn't say anything. What's wrong? You seem troubled. Oh, that's right. You're home early, so that's perfect. The thing is, ta-da! She looked well. She was a little older than Zenith, he remembered. I said I hated this chapter. But otherwise, she was the same cheerful mother he remembered when he was living in Fatoa. You're grown up, Rudy, but I haven't heard anything about romance. So I went out and found a partner for you. She showed him a painting of a woman on a board, a matchmaker's photo. He knew the woman in the painting. He was pretty sure that she worked at the Magician's Guild, the fourth daughter of a Renault noble family. She had more talent to magic than her sisters, so she enrolled in the university. But while she was there, her family fell into ruin. Unable to go home, she joined the Magician's Guild. This is the one that made his weapon, right? Wasn't this the one that Roxy was friends with and had make the magical implement? I think it is. I think they mentioned that story with her. She's in the same guild as you. When I said that I was looking for a bride for you, Reedy, she seemed enthusiastic. You don't seem like you'd be happy with a strategic marriage. Well, I thought it was a matter of taste. So I talked to her, and she didn't seem totally opposed. Zenith sounded really happy. If she hadn't ended up in the teleportation labyrinth, if he hadn't married Sylphie or Roxy, if he hadn't had any other romances, then Zenith would likely have meddled in his love life. If he accepted, she'd be overjoyed like a schoolgirl, making her dolls kiss and hurrying things along. If Sylphie had lived nearby, she might have done everything she could to bring them together. What do you think, Rudy? Isn't she pretty? Would you like to meet her? Okay, that's great. All right, I'll talk to them first. I worry about you, and Aisha's just the same. Neither of you have any instinct for this kind of thing, nor is the only one with any luck in this department. Yeah, that's true. I thought as Paul's son, you'd be insatiable. It's because you're too cautious around girls. She went back to setting the table. I'm your son too, Mom. I thought as Paul's son, you'd be insatiable. I'm your son too, Mom. I think that's the first time, right? Isn't that the same? I think that's the first time. I think, isn't that the first time he said that he's her son? He's called her Mom. Rhea stood frozen. Magic concentrated on his finger as he pointed at Zenith. His hand was shaking. And tears threatening to spill out from his cheeks. He couldn't do it. Zenith left for the kitchen. A few days passed. Paul was in the study the whole time, his legs gone. That would be too... I don't think... Vita knows where it freaking hurts. Wouldn't be able to do it. Don't think I'd be able to do it. Especially since this is sort of getting rid of that what-if scenario that you want. That what-if scenario that you can't have if you leave the world. If he leaves here, he can hang out with Ariel. If he leaves here, he can have fun with Linia. He can't leave here and talk to Zenith. He can get everything that he's getting in this dream world if he just leaves it. That's the one thing he can't have. Vita is... F*** you, Vita. F*** you, Vita. Have you found what's wrong? Then hurry up and destroy it. He spoke just like he did back when he was still alive. When Rudeus told him that Zenith was a source, he didn't say anything else. In this world, Rudeus was part of the Magician's Guild. The same scenario that when he was with Linia. The only difference was Zenith was rescued and safe and sound. Paul was dead. They bought the house when Norn and the others came to the city. It was supposed to be a home for everyone when Paul came back. Rudeus went to work at the Magician's Guild, then came home at night to have dinner with his mother and sisters. If he got out of his shutout life in his previous life and got a job, he could see himself falling into a rhythm like this. That was how the time he spent here made him feel. Setting up his prospective betrothal was also progressing. Their mating went off without a hitch, maybe because they worked together and knew a fair bit about each other. Arrangements galloped along. She'd known him since her days at the university, and she'd been a little fond of him ever since. Rudeus didn't remember this, but apparently one time she'd been surrounded by dodgy guys, and he had rescued her. She came across as quiet and plain, but she was clever, sensible, and observant. Maybe she was a bit lacking in the appeal as a prominent romantic partner, but as a potential wife, she was perfectly adequate. After they were set up, they went on 2 dates. On the third, he proposed, and she agreed. Zenith just about put on a festival when Rudeus told her. After that, their wedding sailed along. They were fortunate enough to have a house with plenty of unused rooms. It wasn't a problem bringing his fiancée into the house, and she moved in right away. More than anything else, it was what Zenith wanted. She gushed to Lilia about how they would do so many things together. The night before the wedding, Zenith and Lilia were beside themselves with excitement. Norn and Aisha joined in on all the fuss for a while, but eventually got bored and went off to bed. Rudeus stayed with the two of them until Lilia fell asleep. She'd had a bit too much to drink, without anyone else to gush to. Zenith kept on chipping away at drinks, telling Rudeus about what he'd been like as a child and things like that. Then, out of the blue, she said, I ain't gonna be able to read this. I'm not gonna be able to read this. She said a bunch of stuff, and then Rudeus blasted her. I don't want to read any of that stuff. I'm joking. It feels like there's a weight off my shoulders. I was a burden on you? No, that's not what I mean. You always looked after us after Paul died in the teleportation labyrinth, Rudy. I'm your mother. I shouldn't be looked after, I thought. I should be looking after you. I wish I could. I see. Rudy, once you're married, if your wife is ever in a bad mood, or if there's some girl things you don't understand, you come ask me. She stroked Lilia's hair when she slept beside her, looking a little embarrassed. I'm sure Paul would have been able to say it better. But I'm your mother. So I know I can give you advice too. Rudeus didn't say anything. Rudy, hey there, what's wrong? Tears were streaming down his eyes. All the dreams Vita showed him were happy. This one was no different. If he hadn't remembered, he could have lived a happy life here. In a world no Edis, Sylphie, he'd still be a virgin, so he'd marry his first girlfriend. His sister would be grossed out, and Zenith would tell him off. He'd go through ups and downs, little by little, growing. It was entirely possible he'd screw it up spectacularly, and they'd get a divorce. Even so, in this world, his family would all live a happy life, not wanting for anything. He knew that. He knew in his soul that was how it would go. This had to be Vita's final act of resistance. He was doing this on the bet that even though Rudeus knew it was a dream, he wouldn't destroy it. And he would be certain that, so long as he took Zenith's form, he wouldn't destroy him. This whole time, Rudeus had been waiting and watching. He saw Zenith smiling like she used to. Thought it might be okay to stay like this. It was true. Rudeus couldn't kill Zenith. But Vita, Rudeus remembered the people that weren't here. Sylphie, Roxy, Edis, and the goofy children they had together. The happy, irreplaceable family he'd given everything to build. The most precious thing he had. Zenith wasn't like Paul. She was in a sort of vegetative state, but she wasn't dead. He already knew that. Getting a straight answer might be difficult, but through the blessed child, he could even ask her for advice when Sylphie was in a foul mood, or Roxy was sulking, or Edis blew up at him. Zenith couldn't smile anymore, but he knew she would be overjoyed to give advice. So this was over. This dream he wanted to stay submerged in forever. This dream of a cheerful and kind Zenith. Rudeus faced Zenith, reached out, touched her face. Thanks for everything, Mom. He then fired a full power stone cannon at her. Oof. Oof. It is honestly very interesting. Again, it kind of broke me earlier, but he technically says, Mom, your son too, is, again, right there pretty much confirming the connection that he has to Zenith. And again, there's a lot of that sign in the whole segment with Millis where he is, fighting with the church and everybody and trying to get Zenith back, that he's obviously really angry about the whole situation. Zenith's mother taking her and him wanting to get her back. And again, a lot of that feeling that I had there was more of a connection between the two of them, as he felt at fault for putting her into danger. And he felt angry about the whole situation because of that. But not so much of a connection of a mother and him. I really do feel like the whole segment where the blessed child looks into Zenith's memories and tells Rudeus everything that Zenith has done up in that point, I feel like that probably cemented for his mind his mom and him. I think he connected to her as like, this is my mom. Like he did with Paul. Paul gave his life for him. That's my father. That was the one. I missed my opportunity. This is really telling here with full mind that he is in a dream state and he's got to stop this Vita. He's got to get out of here and he's being tricked right now. But even still, he struggles with giving it up. He struggles with having Zenith. It is extremely telling that right here, he fully knows Roxy's out there waiting for me. Sylphie's out there waiting for me. Edis is out there waiting for me. This is fake. Zenith before me. This is all fake. But I want to be with mom. That's my mom. And I don't want to give her up. I don't want to leave this place because my mom's right there and she's happy again and she's able to talk to me and I want to be with her. He doesn't want to give up his mother despite everything else not being there. He does eventually. He finally gets up what again I said before, to push himself to do something that he probably really hurts to do is blast your mother because it probably looks extremely real. He's in a dream state. It's probably way too real. This is real. Can you pulling that trigger, so to speak? It's very difficult. But again, I want to emphasize it's very telling how much he cares for his mother right now, Zenith, because he doesn't want to give it up. I don't want to leave. Rudeus felt like he had a devastating dream. What the hell did that asshole Vita show him? He didn't feel angry, probably because the final dream had been so kind. Instead, he felt peaceful, strangely peaceful. Rudeus looked around, and he saw an unfamiliar room without a door. It had 3 chairs, no other furniture, but it felt messy somehow. The vibe reminded Rudeus of his own room and study. Rudeus was sitting in one of the chairs. In front of him were 2 people, or maybe animals. The first was a skeleton. It wore a crown and was covered in black grime. The other was a slime, probably. It was a blue lump shaped like a jelly sitting on the chair, or at least it seemed like it was sitting. I think it's sitting.
It's a pleasure to meet you. I am Abyssal King Vita.
This translucent blue slime was its true form. You're Vita? Rudeus wondered who the skeleton was. Not Paul, surely. He didn't remember the state of Paul's bones back then, but the crown didn't suit him. Yeah, I used earth magic to crush the bones down, so...
I suppose I lost our fight.
The slime spoke with a solemn air. Rudeus didn't know where his face was, so he was relying on his tone of voice. If he admitted defeat, it meant that they were fighting. How was hard to pin down. What Rudeus had done to escape from the dream was kind of a battle. So you used what? Some kind of illusion magic on me to give me visions? Rudeus was made to dream incredibly happy dreams. If he hadn't caught on, they would have gone on forever.
Yes, I predicted possible futures, based on your memories, and blended them with your desires. It was a top-quality hallucination.
Illusion magic. It could be possible. Possible futures. For all that, there have been a lot of holes in the illusions when he looked back on it. Worlds without Sylphie, or Roxy, or Edis, or Paul, who used to be dead, kept popping up. Yeah, right here, without the context of what they get into with the whole, like, the ring and taking on the form of Paul and everything like that, I really did feel like the thing that was breaking the illusion every time was really this massive regret that Rudeus had for Paul. Like, this might be a strong sign that because Rudeus, like, Vita keeps trying to give him Paul back, like, I want to create a great, perfect, ideal world for you, and this Paul death thing seems to hurt you a lot, so let me keep giving it to you. And every single time, Rudeus can't give up the regrets, the massive regrets that he has for the death of Paul. But I think that Vita would get that at some point. Like, I gotta stop giving him Paul because it keeps breaking it. Like, he has this massive, like, regret and guilt for Paul's death. I gotta stop giving him this thing. But no, it ends up being a ring.
You have a strong libido, so that made it easy.
I'm celibate at the moment. It was embarrassing for Rudeus to admit. He'd been with Sarah and Linia and Ariel and Aisha. Rudeus might be lying if he said that he didn't have feelings for any of them. Except for Aisha. There was nothing there. He said nothing. Just come on, Rudeus, just admit it. My love for my wives and my memories of Paul's broke through the illusion, is that right? Rudeus had seen this kind of magic in his previous life, or at least learned it from manga. The point is, he knew the typical ways that he broke through it. Maybe his subconscious mind had put that knowledge into use. There was a pause, but Vita finally replied.
No, don't be ridiculous. You were totally taken in by the illusion. True, the illusion's hold on you was weaker due to the unique nature of your psyche. But once you're taken that far in, breaking out isn't possible.
So, why'd the illusion break?
Because of that.
He pointed to the skeleton. It sat up straight in its chair. What is that?
Please, don't play a fool. You foresaw that we would battle. That's why you were ready from the beginning, wasn't it? With the Bone King, Araxos, my nemesis. Now I come to think of it. That's why you took off the disguise ring on your right hand in front of Rizard to conceal the ring on your left.
Yeah, this guy's thinking that Rudeus is playing 4D chess right here. Rudeus is over here playing 4D chess, right? He's totally playing 4D chess, right? Rudeus was confused for a moment, but then remembered the death god Raxus. So it was the death god ring, the one that Randolph had given him. Now, the odd thing about this whole situation is I don't ever remember them ever mentioning that they were nemesis or whatever.
Raxus' bone ring was crafted by the death god Raxus for the purpose of killing me. It takes the form of a deceased person most trusted by the wearer to break the illusion, then corners the illusionist by taking away their hiding places. It only activates for wearers who have such a trusted person, though.
How would he know how it works if he never used it on it? This feels weird, I'm sorry. It's like he's just going, yeah, it looks like, yeah, that's the ring that Death God... that's the ring that Death God Raxus created that was built for the purpose of killing me, that he never got to use on me, that takes the form of a deceased person that will break the illusion, but it only works with... It's... This reminds me of that scene where Rudeus was, he was working for Orsted, and he had to do that whole, like, play out. Like, he kidnapped the princess, and the hero had to come save the princess so the two of them can get together. And he's like, no, don't tell me you have the reserved figurine. You're saying the reserved figurine that's crafted after the kind bird that saved the world and loves children? It's like that. It breaks the illusion and breaks all the hiding places, all for the sake of killing me, but it requires the person to have a really trusted person, though. I'm sorry, this this line is so cheesy. I didn't realize it when I was reading it earlier, but now that I'm reading out loud, I'm like, this sounds kind of extremely cheesy. Unless Roxos has used it on him before, but I doubt it, because it's made for the purpose of killing him. So thus he's never used it before until now. And the other question is, how does he know that it's Roxas's bone ring? Like, how does he know? Unless he found out from somebody that he had made the ring and he made it for the reason of killing him, and then Vita ran away, like hid to get away from it. In other words, Paul's sudden appearance in the dream was a doing of the bone ring. It was true. The shock of Paul's appearance had forced him to confront that none of it was real. After he realized he was dreaming, Paul gave him hints needed to corner Vita. It wasn't sloppy illusion magic on Vita's part. Yeah, that's the scary part of it. It's like, yeah, I must have figured it out. Yeah, I must have realized it. I would never forget Roxy. I would never forget Sylphie. I could never forget Edis. No, you were cooked. No, you were dead. You were dead.
It seems I was a little dismissive in my assessment of you. I was expecting it to go better at the end, too. Oh well, no one told me you're the sort of heartless man who'd raise his hand against his own mother.
Again, that would be a hard one to do. Reese hadn't expected an attack like this. He hadn't meant to conceal the ring either. Yeah, that's the scary part. Like, this would not play out. He would probably have Rizard kill Rudeus right there if it weren't, or take over Rizard and kill Rudeus there, if it weren't for the fact that Rudeus did put the ring on the other hand. Like, way back here, when he got that disguise, if he put that ring on the same hand that skeleton ring was on, and he went to go take that off in front of Rizard, he would have seen it, and he would just possess Rizard to kill him. It's like a lot of convenience happening here. There's a lot of convenience happening here. This is dumb luck. All this stuff is dumb luck. He hadn't meant to conceal the ring either. Actually, he'd been racked with indecision. He wanted to spend more time with Zenith while she was healthy. He went along with the arranged marriage out of duty to her. After what she said to him in the end, he had no choice but to step away. The real Zenith would have told him to do the same. He was sure she would. That almost feels like a push. Like the idea that the real Zenith would want me to ask for advice, not me. I wonder if that's a push. An unexpected push.
I made a mistake. If I'd known, I would have made Rizard threaten you instead.
Why didn't you?
Rizard was considered joining you, even if it meant leaving his village to die. I panicked. You were off your guard. So I thought everything would go smoothly. I never imagined you had a plan in place to counter me, or you set up a trap to ensnare me.
Nope, only Orsted did. Which again, kind of wish he'd warned me beforehand. But that's important right there. And again, that we technically got that impression before the end of the last chapter, is that Rajerd was planning on possibly joining him. But this is saying, even if it meant leaving his village to die. It gave a sense at the end of the chapter was like Rajerd was considering, okay, we'll go find a cure. We'll work together, we'll find a cure. I won't fight you. I don't want to fight you, Rudeus. We'll work together to find a cure and prevent me from having to face off against you. I don't want to hurt you. This is even saying that Vita's seen in his mind, even if they die, even if the village dies, I might choose to help Rudeus instead. I don't want to kill Rudeus over this. It had been entirely unintentional. Rudeus almost felt like he should apologize or something. Maybe Orsted or the Death God Randolph had predicted something like this. It'd be nice if Orsted at least could have told him how to deal with this in advance. To be fair, he did tell him to wear the ring, so maybe he stayed quiet about the rest. Rudeus could imagine Orsted not worrying as long as he was wearing it. Still, an explanation would have been nice. What if someone else was possessed? That's another good point. Again, technically, it's because Rajerd got possessed right there. And it would have been nice to know, oh yeah, just put the ring on Rajerd when you see him, and that'll fix it. Again, this is kind of left it up to chance right here. Why it's kind of funny is to think about, yes, how close to the edge he was. It's like one of those happenings. I'm pretty sure that everybody's had this moment. I've had this moment several times where something happens and at the moment you don't realize what it is. And then it's like seconds or minutes afterwards, after you kind of register everything that just happened, that you were like this close to death. Like if something was off by just a millimeter more, you'd be dead. It's that kind of feeling. Like you just had a brush with death. This is that situation. Again, the hands. If you had taken the ring off the other hand, I would have known you had it. To be fair, this wasn't the first time Orsted failed to convey any more than bare minimum info, nor the first time Rudeus failed to ask for more. There it is right there, and I'm sure everybody was probably laughing about that when I was reading the first chapters of this volume, was like, Rudeus, ask why the ring, ask who Chandel is, like, ask questions, Rudeus. Probably goes before the fall, I suppose. Indeed, it does. He's like, maybe I should tell this guy. Yeah, I didn't even know what the ring did, dude. You got screwed and I didn't even know it. Vita shrank before Rudeus' eyes, as though his strength was draining rapidly. Beside him, the skeleton slowly crumbled. The dead person Rudeus trusted most. So, that was who Paul was to him? Again, that's very interesting. If it has to be the person that he trusts the most, not Sylphie, not Roxy, not Edis, not Cliff, not Elise, nobody else, Paul. Interesting. I wonder if that's because that's somebody who has, in his eyes in this new world, been the strongest pillar that he's ever met. The one that was willing to tell him no, the one that was able to correct his path, the one that was still there to support him in a lot of ways. I mean, technically, even to this point, we still have moments where it's almost like Paul's actions still guide him in a way. Like he still sees Paul as sort of a guiding post in a lot of ways.
After reigning for centuries as the most powerful king in the Sticky's history, I never dreamed that things would end this way. Well done, Quagmire Rudeus.
Rudeus didn't know how to respond to that. He hadn't seen this coming. Should he tell him that it was luck? Maybe not luck. Rudeus did go to Randolph. Rudeus considered saying, you call yourself the most powerful king ever? But just that idea. There was something he needed to ask. I have one question. Are you a disciple of the man god?
Yes, I am. I am indebted to him. He helped me escape the clutches of the death god Raxus and showed me the way to hell on the divine continent. I've only survived this long thanks to him. But then I left, and look where it got me. I suppose it was fate.
Maybe right there is sort of indicating that possibility that maybe Raxus used the ring on him, and because of man god's advice, he was able to get away from it. I don't know. Vita shrank smaller and smaller. When they first got to this room, he'd been the size of a person. Now, he was small as a fist.
Let me tell you one last thing, Rudeus. The man god's awful, but there are many like me who will put their faith in him simply because he saved them.
There's pretty much flagging to Rudeus. I mean, we already know, but there I think it's flagging to Rudeus. Be ready for Bodyguardy. Right there, it is literally, hey, get ready for bodyguarding. Because there's nobody else currently enlisted to the man god that we know of right now that is sort of a... I think he would struggle a little bit. Because he's drank and be merry with bodyguarding before. Vita was now the size of a fingertip. Meanwhile, the skeleton crumbled into dust and blew away. Wait, the other disciples? Rudeus shouted, but his awareness faded. Opening his eyes, he felt wide awake. And that's it for Vita. A little bit anticlimactic, I'll be honest. A little bit anticlimactic. I still really felt like there was going to be a situation where they would have to go to hell to defeat the core. But again, this all kind of confirms that the core was, in fact, inside of Rejerd. And it seems like he transferred over to Rudeus, which kind of makes sense because I don't think they ever indicated that anybody else had a marking around their eye or their gem. And so that kind of indicated that Rejerd was the initial carrier of it, that Vita was in that jar given to Rejerd. And then from there, it was splitting off to give to everybody else. I was kind of expecting the possibility of the core being elsewhere and giving each separate part to him. Because I guess that's something that a lot of people kind of apparently missed in my last Mushoku Monday and my rant around that. It wasn't so much the idea that I question why Rejerd would accept this as something to help his people. Obviously, he's going to help his people. That wasn't the shock for me. The question mark was, at the point of facing off against Rudeus, what would keep him doing it? What would keep him in line for Geese? Because in the end, upon discovering everything that Rudeus told him about Geese and himself and how the man god can't be trusted and yada, 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 what keeps him pushing to fight Rudeus when he already has Vita? Will Vita be able to take control, as we find out? Would Geese have the core of Vita to kill to trigger the illness to spread again and for them to all be harmed again? What? The question wasn't so much why he would take it. It was the question of what was the guarantee that Vita would stay after he harms Rudeus, after they beat Rudeus. What would keep Vita around? I wouldn't see Vita hanging out with them afterwards. But again, back to this whole thing. Very surprised that that's it for Vita. It was very quick. Resolved. Moving on. Opening his eyes, he felt wide awake. He remembered it all. The dreams, the conversation, the room at the end. Seized by a sharp pain in his stomach, Rudeus felt the urge to puke. Bending over on all fours, he vomited up a sticky fluid. It was blue. The blue fluid oozed over the ground, mixing with stomach juices and last night's dinner. Was this Vita's corpse? Just then, Rudeus felt a strange sensation in his left hand. Removing his gauntlet, the death god's ring fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. It sank into the puke with a squelching sound. It breaking must confirm Vita's story. By entering his body of his own accord, Vita had committed suicide via death god ring. The poor guy. Was this a bad call on Vita's part? If he hadn't taken control of Rudeus, the man god would win. It was coincidence, or maybe fate, that had stopped him. Raxus's bone ring hadn't only been good for making Kishirika talk after all. Randolph himself might not have known the ring's real power either. I would assume that there's a good chance that he was given it for the sake of taking out Vita. I mean, there's a whole story right there. Again, it feels like this is another one of those moments where it's like, I kind of wish we have a little bit more context to this. I kind of want to know what the story is. Again, it kind of plays out like the two of them were at each other, and at some point, Raxus was going to win, and Vita had to use the man god to help him out to get the hell out of there. And he fled off. And at some point, he finally comes out just to get killed by him in the end. It almost felt like it all went according to Raxus's keikaku. One day, he'll give it to some boy, he'll get possessed, and then they can take him out finally. All right, what about Rejerd? Rudeus was inside Rejerd's house. Considering what happened, maybe Rejerd had carried him over after Vita jumped into him. It was light outside, but how long was he out? Rejerd? No reply. Maybe he was out. Or maybe there was another reason. Sitting up, Rudeus found Rejerd right away. He was lying on the ground nearby. Rudeus was shocked upon seeing his face. It was gray, and he was wheezing, shivering violently as he clutched at himself. This was bad. It reminded Rudeus of something Rejerd said. If the Abyssal King Vita dies, his offshoots die as well. The village would be engulfed by the plague again. So Rejerd was in the state because the plague. Abyssal King Vita hadn't just died quietly. More than inadvertent suicide, it was a suicide bombing. The last line's word. It's like the last line's a little, okay, I don't get that, but all right, cool. Sucks. Sucks. I don't like this, right? We at least avoided Rudeus and Reserve fighting each other. I got what I want where they don't fight each other, but then we're going to go right into the plague. And now we have to deal with the plague situation and how we can possibly get through that. Sucks. But that is chapter 5. Like I said, a very, very mixed chapter for me. On one end, I really don't like the repetitive nature of that type of storytelling. It always frustrates me. It's like, just get to the point already. I don't care anymore. But at the same time, there's a lot in here that I really do like, and I was not ready for the whole Zenith part. I honestly got through it pretty decently okay when I read through it the first time, but actually having to read it aloud, like I've said before, sometimes doing an actual like record read like this, it suddenly starts hitting me more. It really does start hitting me more once I start to kind of put it into spoken word. It's kind of a weird oddity that I've found over the time of going through this series, obviously, but really, really unfortunately hard stuff to get through there. And again, I do like the fact of almost solidifying, at least in my mind, that a lot of that stuff around Zenith was a lot more powerful than I originally thought, because I think a lot of that has to do with him right there connecting Zenith to himself. I don't want to leave this behind. I don't want to lose this, despite the fact that everything else is out there. I want to have this stuff. And that's really probably a good reason why Vita, at least in that moment, didn't want to apply any of his wives into the picture, his children into the picture, is because, yeah, obviously, and I think that's ultimately the choice he makes. I can give this up because this is important. And again, I think that whole idea of the advice that Vita, I think, mistakenly said almost connects that Zenith wouldn't want me to stay here. I need to leave. I need to get to my wives. I need to get to my family. They're all waiting for me out there. I can't stay here. Ugh, sucks. It really sucks. Again, I almost feel like the whole thing around Vita feels a little bit anticlimactic, and I almost feel like if there was a little bit more breadcrumbing around Raxus, was his name, the Death God, and Vita, that might have been a little bit more interesting. Maybe we'll get a little bit more into them later on. Maybe the next time that Rudeus meets up with Randolph and explains what happened, maybe Randolph will give us a little bit more story there, or maybe that's just it right there. But obviously, yes, this is leaving on a really bad cliffhanger, and I apologize for the fact that we're not going to get into chapter 6 this time around. Like I said, it's a busy week, and I felt like this is a long chapter anyways. I'm assuming at this point, I don't think that they're going to kill off Reserve. I think there's too much buildup right here that we're going to just leave Reserve to die right here. The question mark is how Rudeus is going to be able to save Reserve at this point. It's got to be a now. It doesn't look like Reserve's in a good spot. I like how Rudeus kind of points out that Reserve was probably in this state when he was looking for a cure. Like when he was out there looking for somebody, he was in the state. And again, it does kind of apply itself to why Reserve chose to accept Vita, because he was in this state. He's seen other Supers die already, and he didn't want anybody else to be in the state. And so he took upon himself this. And now he's right back to where he was, probably in an even worse state than he was before, because, again, it wasn't curing it. It was just kind of a stopgap. It was something that was putting it off. And he was probably still decaying over time. Like you said, it's not cured. It's just being somewhat paused, I guess. Again, I still kind of expect that Shandel has seen something, that Shandel might do something. But other than that, the only expectations that I have here is that Rudeus is going to rush off to go to Orsted to get an answer. And I don't think Orsted is going to have an answer. There's a side of me that believes that Orsted, one of two things here, like I said last time, either knew that there was no cure and didn't give him a cure, or if he had a cure, he didn't want to give it to them because they would have turned on him. But now that Rudeus has sort of resolved the situation, he might be able to talk Orsted into saying, okay, here's the cure, go take it over there. Another option here, Orsted knowing where he's going, even though he did say that he felt a little better having Shandel at his side, Orsted might already be there. He might be watching from a distance and keeping an eye on the situation and might step in now to help out Rudeus. Why he hasn't came in there yet? That's the massive question mark. I think Orsted would have probably stepped in sooner if he was watching. But the fact that Shandel was going with him and knowing that Rudeus was going to end up here, possibly, he might know that Shandel already knows how to help the situation. Because, again, Orsted at the time it seems like he was going to apologize for not telling Rudeus about Rajerd. And then upon stepping out there and seeing that Shandel could go with him, might have eased his mind a little more there, thinking that Shandel can probably resolve this situation, that Shandel knows a cure. And again, Shandel was intrigued by something and ran off. He's probably trying to work for a cure to help them out. And I think that Shandel would probably want to help them out. I don't know. Maybe I'm putting too much trust into Shandel. Refugion's already kind of shattered my thoughts on him stepping in on this situation, but maybe that might be him stepping in for that situation. But I mean, there's also a chance here that Shandel doesn't like the Superds. I think we would have seen a sign before this. Either way, that's my current prediction, that either Orsted is there and steps in, or Shandel knows a cure for this particular plague, or Rudeus just has to rush out to go see Orsted, and Orsted, upon finding out that Rajerd was going to turn on Vita, which would end up being the reason why he turns on them, and offers a way to fix it. Because there's a good chance that Orsted already knows that Vita is the reason why Rajerd eventually does join the Man God, and that's why he was okay with Rudeus going with that ring on. And that's why he specifically pointed out the ring. He had to know that Vita was going to get involved because of that ring. Anyways, that's it. We're going to leave it off there. I thank you guys so much for dropping by for the premiere. Hey, chat, hope you guys had a great Monday. I hope you guys have a great rest of your Monday after this Mushoku Monday. Greatly appreciate you guys' kind words, your support, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. As per usual, greatly appreciate everybody that support channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. You have no idea how much. And until the next Mushoku Monday, into the year of 2025, y'all take care.
It seems I was a little. It seems I was middle.
I'm sorry. Did I let my mouth run away from me? I'm sorry. Did I let my mouth run away from me? I'm sorry. Did I let my mouth run away with me out? I'm sorry. Did I let my mouth run away with me a while? I'm sorry. Did I let my mouth run away with me a while? A little. Away with me 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 a little. I'm sorry. Did I let my mouth run away with me a little while? Linia Norm, we're living at Pal's. Lilia Norm, we're